OK.
So what you been up to for 20 years?
Choose life. Choose Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and hope that someone, somewhere cares.
I missed you, mate.
I missed you too, Spud.
Irving published a book, Porno, which was like a 10 years later book. And we tried to adapt that. Well, John Hodge, the screenwriter of the original adaptation of the first film and this one eventually, he tried and he did a fairly faithful adaptation. In film terms, it just didn't work. And we got together in Edinburgh about 18 months ago for a final goal because the 20th anniversary which felt like, Leighton, if we're not going to do it now, we'll never do it. So we should have one last go at it. And we sat up in Edinburgh and there's no great moment, revelation moment or tipping point. And I don't think John felt there was one as well. But we talked, we read that original script, we read stuff from the books, we talked and met some people and got back into the vibe of the city and Irving was there. And John went away and then he wrote something very, very personal. He didn't really write an adaptation of a book. There are sequences and elements that are drawn from both books, actually. But he wrote something much more personal, I think, about himself through the prism of these characters and really about ageing, I suppose. And it was extraordinary reading it. And I knew immediately that I should send it to the actors. And not only that, I knew they would do it as well.
It was an amazing script to read and a very strange experience to be reading characters that we know and love so well and that were so important to us. And it's still so vivid and alive. They're so well drawn, those characters by Irvin Welsh and also by John Hodge, the screenwriter. And it was a very extraordinary reading, every page.
Where did it all go wrong?
Where did it all go wrong?
Where did it all go wrong? Where did it all go wrong?
The best you can say is that every single one of these characters were in exactly the place I would want them to be. Spud, still struggling with drug addiction, and Sick Boy still being a chancer, Begbie being in the nick. I mean, where else could these characters be? So it was a relief to see that and to come across these characters 20 years down the line.
It felt more like the film was about masculinity over time, really. That's what it felt. And as they moved into a manhood. And using the word manhood, you then start to use the word father figure, and you realise that the film is littered with children, that they have fathered, and they're often, they are all disappointed children. And there are women there as well whose agency is very quiet in the film, but they are disappointed. And there's been proper and real and important work to do while these men have been off, standing still, or literally spending the time trying to loop back to the bravado with which they enjoyed their boyhood.
We're all old enough to know now, you don't get through 20 years without picking up some wounds along the way. And 20 years does a lot to a person, and it's not a picnic. There's great stuff that that brings you joy, but there's also things that you struggle with to overcome. And Spud's journey through this is always, certainly now more than ever in this story, to become a better man. He desperately wants to become the man that his wife and child need him to be, and it's just out of his reach. Tragically, he aspires so much towards it, but he's struggling against greater forces.
It's not getting it out of your body that's the problem, it's getting it out of your mind. You are an addict.
I think I haven't heard that 100,000 times, Mark. You got 12 more steps for my comedy.
So, be addicted. Be addicted to something else.
Like running until I feel sick?
Yes. Or something else. You've got to channel it. You've got to control it.
What Danny wasn't trying to do brilliantly was recreate the first movie or find those people then. That's like trying to be your 22-year-old self again. It's not possible. So I found by being on set with these actors who I know and love and being directed by Danny, who I know and love, and saying John Hodge's words, it all came back pretty soon. My first scene was our fight scene. The first scene I played in the movie was our reunion scene when I walk back into the pub and we clap eyes on each other for the first time in 20 years. And that was a great way to start. I mean, for me, it was a great way to start. It couldn't have been any better.
With Danny, you can sense his experience and knowledge. I mean, it just emanates from the man. But he's exactly the same in the way that he is obsessed with the truth. He goes further than anybody else I've ever met in the business in terms of investigating his locations, investigating the world that he's trying to show, involving all members of the crew in that experience, and everybody feels like they're contributing to the filmmaking process. The man rarely sits down and has the energy that you see in the film is really who he is. He has this extraordinary stamina and energy.
They spend the first film, as you do when you're in your teens or your 20s, time's irrelevant. You just don't give a hoot about it. You do not care about it. And then you get a bit older and you realise it's time doesn't care about you, is actually the way the equation works. So it was wonderful to be able to flex time throughout it and go in and out it, stop it, start it. You had this extraordinary ability, because we had the resource of the first film, where you could pick, very occasionally, there's only about a minute of footage from the first film used in it, but you have that incredible thing where you're able to put side by side the material from earlier, your memory explicitly on screen there, with its real version now.
You can't imagine what it might feel like to see yourself in your early 20s cut in with yourself now, playing the same character, and where in such a clever and meant way, and a way that's showing us these characters looking back on their life in a way that's making us do the same thing. And when it's actually your face, that's quite profound.
Thankfully for you two, I've done some due diligence on you. And what I hear is you're a couple of losers. Two absolute losers. How does that sound, Simon?
Yeah, that's probably right enough.
Aye, probably right enough. Right answer.
It's about giving the audience an opportunity and a chance to reflect, to enjoy reminiscing about the past, to have this kind of walk through a nostalgic time in their life. Because the 90s, certainly when the first film came out, it's kind of special time. You know, we'd been through 1,000 years of Conservative rule, and we were suddenly in a Labour government. There was a kind of, an explosion, a kind of almost like a zeitgeist of culture in film and in art and in music. It was a spectacular time, and I think, hopefully, this gives the people who lived through that the chance to revisit that moment.
There's a great weight associated with this project, because Trainspotting was more than a film. It's something that people identified with in a way that they felt invested personally. They felt that it spoke for who they were, what they were. They felt recognised by just the birth of the original film. And so it was always like, it felt like you're carrying a precious, delicate thing that you have to hold it very carefully.
I tried to approach it with the kind of innocence that we had in the first film, in a way. And that's easier because it was the actors were back again, and that relationship quickly re-established itself. God knows why, but we get on very, very well, the four of us, and the four of them and me, and we've been able to work quickly and dynamically and excitingly, and they're very, very different, each of them, and yet none of it's become a problem, and that's over 2 films now. You know, that equation, that chemistry, that alchemy.